let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in the importance of
What is that process that a developer, or let's say,
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours live stream. I am co-host Andrew Sullivan, joined as always and sometimes filled in by Mr. Jonny Rickard. How are you, sir?
I'm good, buddy. How are you? Welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I think I said this the last time that it's been like a minute. It's been a few weeks since I was on here. Thank you for taking the reins, taking control of everything last week, and making sure that we continued on. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Anytime.
So yeah, how's it going? How you been? Because it has seriously been a minute since I saw you, since I chatted with you. So
yeah, I know it's been good. We've been just getting summer started, so got the kids at home, so that's why I've had to change colors again and move locations so that way I have some privacy. But yeah, things have been good.
Yeah, I know all too well how that is. I just saw my youngest walk by. There's a glass door on the other side of my monitor here. She just walked by and peeked in and saw, oh, look, you're streaming, and decided to keep on walking. So, summertime in the US, kids are home doing all the fun stuff. So what are we talking about this week, Jonny? I will admit, so I just got back off of leave. I was completely disconnected for the last, week and a half. So I am mostly clueless. I know Natalia, I know Gerald, but I'm not clear on what we're talking about today.
No. So we are going to talk about OpenShift for DevOps. So Natalia and Gerald's group reached out and they said, hey, we've got a topic, and I was like, all right, well, I mean, we'll see, and no, they came out and there's a blog that was published out on the OpenShift blog about OpenShift for DevOps, and I'll get the link in just a second and paste it. But yeah, it's a really good idea. It's a really good topic. The demo that was on the blog is excellent. I watched it a couple times and it's really well done. And yeah, so here we are. So it's looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think this was the first of a series of analyst things that we did. I know my team has been consumed by doing analyst things here the last couple of months, which has been really, really great. Actually, I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of all of that and being able to share all of that stuff with everyone. And this is just the first of several. So, but yeah, I know Natalia, Gerald, you all put in a ton of work into this, and it's really awesome to see the result of that. And I know that there's, in addition to the blog post, there's like a whole playlist of videos that showcase every aspect of this. So before we get started, or before we get too far in, I want to give you all the opportunity to introduce yourselves. So I'll kick off with, I'll go in the opposite order that I've been saying your name so far. I'll kick off with Gerald.
Hey, my name is Gerald Nunn. I am the Principal GitOps Technical Marketing Manager for Red Hat. So I cover all things GitOps, and I do a bit on the pipeline side as well.
Yeah, I know you're the GitOps guru when it comes to most things that are happening inside of OpenShift. So good, excellent work, I must say. Because anytime I have questions, anytime I need anything, I can always shoot a message over to Gerald, and he's awesome at answering those. So thank you, and Natalia.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here and see you also in the show. Andrew, we see each other at Summit. That was also great. Great to see you, Jonny, here. And Gerald is the GitOps guru. That's a reference. That's a fact. I'm really great. I'm really glad to be here. And my name is Natalia Vinta. I'm a developer advocate lead here in Red Hat. We're a team of developer advocate, global technical evangelists covering OpenShift and all cloud native. I've been an OpenShift specialist solution architect in the past, and I have my show in OpenShift TV called OpenShift Coffee Break. It's on EMEA time zone, but we talk about OpenShift cloud native architecture. So that's great to connect also with this side of the world for the show. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, I know for our EMEA folks and for anyone who really follows the YouTube channels, Natalia is a familiar face from doing the OpenShift. It's the OpenShift coffee hour, right?
Coffee break.
Coffee break. That's right. Yep. So,
yeah,
and I know.
the idea was, when we started, we couldn't meet at the office where we were talking about everything at the coffee machine. Say, why don't we do a show talking about coffee and OpenShift? That's the idea.
That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I think I've mentioned before here on the stream, we had a similar thought when we started with this channel, which was, it was back during COVID, and we didn't have conferences or anything like that where we could go and meet people. See, people would walk up to us in a booth and ask questions. So we wanted to start the office hours for more or less exactly the same purpose. Like, hey, here's time we're available. Come and ask us questions about anything and everything that's on your mind, just like we were standing in a booth at a conference. And then, of course, there's always happens to be some sort of topic, something that we like to talk about.
Yeah. And I have to admit that Ask an Admin is really our reference also in EMEA. So sometimes we repropose the topic that we saw at the Ask an Admin. It's also, for us, it's a guide, it's a reference. So thank you for doing this show. It's really great.
Oh, thank you. We really appreciate it. And thank you to our audience. The audience is sort of what makes us or breaks us, right? And you all are amazing, and we love all of the interactivity that we get. I think Jonny and I say this just about every week of like, the whole reason we're here is to answer questions and get emails and Slack messages and all that stuff from everyone. So it really is a lot of fun that we have.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, let's talk about some top of mind topics. So before we kick off on that, so remember, this is, as we just said, this is one of the office hour series of live streams with Red Hat live streaming. So what that means is that we're here to answer your questions. Anything, everything that happens to be on your mind that you want to ask us about, we're happy to do our best to answer those, to find answers for you, or otherwise follow up if we don't happen to know the answer, which, Jonny and I and Natalia and Gerald today are very knowledgeable about OpenShift and things Red Hat in general, but we are certainly not all knowing, despite what my kids think. So if you have any questions, if there's anything that we can't answer, we're happy to follow up and get those answers for you. And we will share those both directly if you send us an email or something, as well as we like to talk about them in future shows as well. So don't hesitate to ask questions, whether or not it's relating to OpenShift for DevOps, whether or not it's relating to anything that we're talking about today, whatever questions you got. Thank you for putting up the graphic there, Jonny. Don't be shy. And of course, if you're not watching us live, I know a lot of people watch the recording, don't hesitate to reach out. So you can always reach out and ping us on Slack. So the Kubernetes Slack has an OpenShift users channel that you can reach us on, as well as email. You're more than welcome to reach out to me, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. And somewhere in here we go, or at Practical Andrew. So you can reach me on the various social media things, whether it's Twitter or Reddit or all of those. And you can reach out to Jonny as well, at JRockTX1 on the social media platforms. And of course, Jonny, JONNY at redhat.com. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for. And we love to get those questions. All right, Jonny, what's going on top of mind today?
Yeah, so we have just a couple. One, I need to make a correction. I called Red Hat Developer Hub last week, Red Hat Data Hub. So the whole Janus IDP backstage integration, the product is going to be called Red Hat Developer Hub, not Red Hat Data Hub. So just wanted to correct that. I caught it afterwards. I was repeating it back in my head, and I'm like, "You idiot! You got it wrong." So want to make sure I got that corrected. And then just keep in mind, next week is the U.S. holiday for Independence Day. So July 4th is the actual holiday. On the 5th, we're not going to be streaming, but we will be back on the 12th. And we've got we've actually got the next few weeks of streams scheduled out pretty far through August. So we've got a couple of partners coming on. We've got Portworx, we've got Trilio, we've got the Bare Metal hosted control plane team coming on. And we've also talked to the Red Hat OpenShift data science team. So they're going to come on and they're going to do some demos and they're going to talk about the different products and stuff like that. Portworx is going to be really interesting because we just did Kasten back in May. And so Portworx is going to show their DR solution with OpenShift and Portworx, which is going to be really awesome. And looking forward to just all of it. It's a bunch of nerd stuff. It's going to be exciting. Some from just Red Hat side, or I guess the environment side, the ecosystem. IBM acquired Apptio, which is going to be awesome on OpenShift because it's I think they do like cloud spend. I'm not sure if you guys know this or not. Like they do like cloud spend and like they're like financial management and stuff like that. So like FinOps. So it's gonna be a cool acquisition. So hopefully we get to take advantage of it. So
Yeah. Cloud spend. That's for the finance guys to worry about. It's all free to me.
yeah. Exactly. I'm a consumer. And then the last thing is that AAP, the automation or Ansible automation platform 2.4 just went GA, and the big things for me that came out of that are that the platform install support for ARM. So last week we had the multi-arch support guys come on, and just kind of continuing that theme where like now we're gonna be able to install AAP on ARM. Validated content integration, and then the event-driven automation. So the event-driven automation is going to be super awesome. I think like that is just such an awesome thing.
Did I see something about Ansible Lightspeed today?
I saw something. I can't remember what it was though. And the Lightspeed team is going to be on the GitOps Guide to the Galaxy live stream tomorrow. So if you're interested in Ansible Lightspeed, and tune into the GitOps Guide to the Galaxy live stream tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, and for anyone who's not familiar, so Ansible Lightspeed was what we talked about at Summit. So it was a part of the keynotes. It was the thing where it uses AI to generate Ansible playbooks based off of plain language input. So I thought that there was an announcement that we made about that, but my cursory searching of email while we're on the stream here is not turning up anything. So yeah, I'll have to dig that up and see if we can point to it at some point here. Alphadil, my apologies for borking or for messing up anybody's names. Does Red Hat have a package registry solution like SonarQube or Artifact? I'm assuming that's Artifactory. So yes. So I guess there's kind of 2.5 things that we can talk about there. So OpenShift out of the box includes an integrated registry. So that registry is, I'll call it kind of vanilla or kind of plain, right? It acts as a great place for internal images to be stored. You can use it to push and pull images using things like image streams. But at the core, it's just a basic registry. So the full featured one would be Quay or Key, depending on which English you prefer. So it has a whole bunch of other features, a whole bunch of capabilities, including things like Claire vulnerability scanning and all kinds of other stuff. It's also able to hook into, or bridge, I think is the term they use, across multiple OpenShift instances. So, if you're running OpenShift Platform Plus and you have a hub cluster, you deploy one Quay instance, and then you can point multiple OpenShifts at it. So that way you have a single, global registry. It does things like geo-replication, all that other stuff. And then the sort of half one that I was talking about is Advanced Cluster Security. ACS has a number of hooks and features in with both of those. So for example, if you're using the default OpenShift registry, and you want to do vulnerability scanning, you can use ACS, and ACS can actually do that for you. So there's a bunch of stuff inside of there that you can talk about. Can anyone tell me what is different between Ansible Platform, and Tower? So Jonny, you're probably more qualified to answer this than I am. My understanding is Ansible, just plain Ansible, is the upstream, the open source project. Ansible, what used to be called Ansible Tower, is now called Ansible Automation Platform, and that is the Red Hat product.
Yep. So plain Ansible is just the binary, right? So the Ansible, what you would install, from, satellite or from, Fedora packages or whatever, and then the Ansible Tower is now AAP is the artist formerly known as Ansible Tower, right? I mean, like that's what it is. And AAP and Tower are a wrapper around. It's a workflow wrapper. It does way more than that. I'm oversimplifying this, but it's a wrapper around like the Ansible binary that allows you to configure jobs, workflows, schedules, all kinds of craziness, and it's excellent for visual representation of your automation.
Yeah.
And
and it can be deployed onto OpenShift, which is really cool. It deploys just as a set of containers that are running inside of the platform that can automate both inside and outside the platform, which is really cool. RHope 9, it's not just Watson integration that writes the Ansible. Yes, but no. I don't know the exact mechanics of what's happening in the background. So I know it's a large language model that is trained based off of a number of different inputs. And then you use that in order to, whatever the Lightspeed integration is, in order to generate those playbooks. What I don't know is what's actually doing the training. No, let me rephrase that. I know exactly what's doing the training. It's a gigantic OpenShift cluster, actually. That's the IBM research team uses. It's several. I want to say it's well over 1,000 nodes at this point that they use, but I don't know like how they take that and how they actually get it into Ansible Lightspeed and how they do all kinds of other stuff. So I don't know. I actually haven't seen a like an internal or internal isn't the right word, a detailed breakdown in like 6 months. I talked with that team back in the December-January timeframe, and they were doing just some really awesome stuff. Like I'm so excited. I'm so happy to see it being promoted, and we were able to showcase it at Summit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's some really, really interesting stuff that's happening there. And me, I am not an Ansible expert by any stretch of the imagination. So this concept of being able to just in plain language say, hey, go do this thing. I have enough knowledge to be able to look at it and say, yes, that makes sense. Yes, this is going to do what I want or not, and then kind of go from there. So I don't have to be an Ansible expert. I just have to understand, what's going on. It's kind of like being a plumber. I'm not a plumber, but I can look at some plumbing and tell you that's not right and ask for the expert, the actual plumber to, redo that work. What's that?
Well, yep, that's broke.
Yeah, that's not going to drain right. That's probably not what we want. David, if a developer wanted to grab a local OpenShift deployment to hack on, what would be the lowest barrier to entry method? So you can use the Red Hat developer entitlements. That would probably be if you wanted to deploy something yourself, if you wanted to have it, on-prem using your resources or in your laptop. Use the OpenShift developer entitlement, or use what do we call that thing now? Is it OpenShift Local? Yeah, I think it's OpenShift Local. So OpenShift Local is kind of like you run one command, it deploys a virtual machine onto your laptop or your desktop, and then you can run. It's a single node OpenShift instance. You can do things against that. The developer entitlements give you 16 nodes or 16 entitlements to OpenShift. So you can deploy a full cluster and you can use that for whatever you want to, so long as it's single user, non-production use cases. And the second part of your question there, can it be used on Debian-based systems or purely Red Hat? So it's purely Red Hat. So OpenShift is sort of three things. I'm going to paraphrase it as three things. So one is Kubernetes. So it is Kubernetes at the core, and then below that is Red Hat Enterprise Linux Core OS, or what we call just Core OS oftentimes. So it is a tightly integrated, container-optimized operating system that's managed from within OpenShift itself. And then on top of that, we have all of the features, all of the capabilities that take it from being, I say, just Kubernetes, as though Kubernetes is this simple thing, but from being, just a Kubernetes platform to being a full application and development platform. So adding in operator, lifecycle manager, and all of the other features and capabilities. So, and it is very tightly coupled across all three of those things. So we do require Core OS.
The other part to that question there, Andrew, was I don't know if you want it on-prem or not, but OpenShift Sandbox can be an option as well. If you just want to go and try OpenShift quickly, it's an in-cloud offering that's free from Red Hat that you can go in, sign up for, and you get a limited amount of resources that you can deploy an application into and play around with it to learn how it works. Yeah,
I'll suggest try.openshift.com is the landing page that has all of the different options available to you. Alpha deal. Oh, I mean a registry for NPM, Maven, and PyP packages. I don't know, Natalie. That's a you question.
Well, which one? NPM?
Yeah, is there a registry or I guess the right word is registry for like NPM modules, Maven, PyP packages, that type of stuff?
Like a Nexus equivalent,
or PyPy, I guess.
Inside any product.
Yeah, I would say inside any Red Hat, anything in the portfolio.
I'm not sure if Red Hat Developer Hub is gonna comprehend one of those. We can check, but the idea is that you have a single point where you can have also those kind of stuff. At the moment, I don't think so. I don't think
I
so.
don't think so either. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know what those things are. I don't know how to use them. So
No, we don't.
Well,
yeah.
Nexus
Quay
or
is just
something.
Yeah, Quay is just an image registry. I shouldn't say just because it does a lot, but it's an image registry. It does not replace Artifactory from a package point of view. Typically, if customers wanted to do that and not use a vendors, then Nexus would be the way to go for that.
Yeah.
Good to know. And today I learned. Okay. Was that all the top of mind stuff we had, Jonny? I know we got distracted by questions.
No, that was it. Yeah, we did good.
Okay. Yeah, keep the questions coming, y'all. Really appreciate them. These are some good questions. Like I said, I'm already learning things. Okay, so let's talk about DevOps and OpenShift. So I guess my first question here. So this came out of an analyst effort, and we took all of the requirements that they had to showcase a set of DevOps capabilities against OpenShift and what that means. So I wanted to start, and I don't know if this is a Gerald or a Natalia question, but I wanted to start with like, what does DevOps mean here in this context? Like, are we talking about automation against the platform for doing things like pipelines? Are we talking about developer workflows? All of the above? Some other things?
I think the request from this particular analyst research was DevOps 360-degree DevOps. So from business requests to implementations, not only the technical automation on, I don't know, on Kubernetes in this case, but the whole flow, the value stream, everything. So from theory to practice, that was a research on the overall DevOps and how vendors implement and support this. So this was the context, and I think in our we joined this research by answering the questions and also providing a demo. Me and Gerald, we focused mostly on the demo part, so we gave our technical help, but lots of Red Hatters from many teams helped a lot on providing product insights and business insights. What's the view, how Red Hat envision DevOps, and how Red Hat envision DevOps with OpenShift and Ansible in this case.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to point out too, is that Ansible automation platform was included as a part of the overall package because it does a lot of other things across a lot of other platforms and stuff like that. So it provided a lot of that interoperability pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at questions here in chat. Boris, how to enable VS Code extensions inside a restricted cluster?
Yeah, that is possible. With dev spaces, you basically have two registries, the plugin registry and the dev file registry. If you want the VS Code compatible extension, you just have to fulfill the plugin registry following the documentation. There's a way where you can use those extension and you can add into your own private registry, and works in disconnected because this private registry is a pod. It contains a list of extension that you can have in your cluster. So it totally works fine. And any Visual Studio Code extension compatible works. For instance, I create a Kotlin extension that was working on Visual Studio Code and then was working on dev spaces in disconnected environment. So that's easy to do. Just follow the documentation on how to add a plugin into the plugin registry.
And I just realized I'm on mute. And then I think the second one may also be a question for you, Natalia. Can we integrate SonarQube and JFrog Artifactory with Tekton as CI and OpenShift?
Well, Gerald, if you want, you can go.
Yeah, you absolutely can, and we'll actually see that in this demo, at least the SonarQube aspect. But Artifactory, for example, we're using Nexus, but the process is the same. Now, for a Java application, it's easy with Maven, but it's not any more difficult with Node or anything else. Those things are fairly generic at this point in time, so it doesn't really require anything specific for the specific product to integrate. But yeah, no problem.
And then
there's most likely, I'm sorry, Andrew. And there's most likely a built-in task or a pipeline run or something that's out in the Tekton hub for that specific integration, right? There's probably an Artifactory, task that somebody's already published that you can go and reuse, reconsume, or like what was the other one? Tecton and
SonarQube.
SonarQube. Yeah, so
Yeah.
SonarQube definitely. I 100%. If you want that, let me know. I've got like something that you could use. But for Artifactory, there's probably definitely something out in Tecton Hub that somebody's already created and you can take advantage of.
Yeah.
All right,
It sometimes depends on the language. Like in Java, for example, as well as Node, which we did. I mean, you can do the integration directly from NPM or from Maven, right? You don't need a separate task to do. So as long as you can run Maven in a task, which obviously you can, the integration is very simple.
That's true. Yep. Good call.
And then RHope9, you were asking about the developer entitlements. I'm looking at, so where that's documented at is what we call Appendix 1. It's the Software and Support Subscriptions Product Appendix 1, and I'll post a link to the current version. So it's extremely riveting reading, let me tell you. But in here, this is what we use. This is what describes all the various use cases and software and entitlements that are included with various things. So somewhere in there should be the thing that describes how many entitlements are included, as well as the specific use cases that you can use with it. So, like I said, single user, non-production use cases. And I'm forgetting because it's been a minute since I looked at this, and it's probably changed. But somewhere in here is where it describes exactly what you can use and where. So anyways, I'll try and parse through this and skim through it and see if I can find the OpenShift specific entitlements for developers and what's included inside of there. But yeah, historically it's been 16 entitlements. But yeah, it could have changed. That would be good if it did. I know that there's
no, I think he's mentioning there was a problem that it's always 16. First, at some point it was 200.
Oh, okay.
That was a problem, technical issue that has been solved. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Alpha Deal, what do you think about making a DevOps pipeline for applications which depend on having some plain code in a server with no build process? How to design it? Can we include approvals in Ansible platform?
Plain code in a server?
Yeah, I'm not sure
I'm following quite what he's getting at. He's talking about like having code sitting on a server somewhere other than not in an SCM or something else.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So Alpha Deal, if you could maybe explain or expand on that a little bit.
But the nice thing with Tecton is it's very flexible. I mean, you can define your own tasks and handle a wide variety of situations. And as a colleague likes to say, Ansible is really the glue for everything. It's kind of like the mortar between the bricks. So anytime there's a gap or something that you need to solve that there's nothing else available, Ansible can always step into that gap and solve that problem for you.
Yeah. And pipelines can have approval tasks as well, right? It's not just
So pipelines do not have approval tasks, but typically we handle that. And we'll see this in the demo through pull requests, and you can do the approvals in Git, which follows a GitOps methodology, is the way I typically recommend handling that.
Okay. That makes sense.
There is a custom task to do approvals. I don't have personal experience with it, but if somebody has and they want to chime in on the questions, that'd be great to hear.
Okay. Well, I'll quit interrupting you for a minute while I digest Apple's question here. So that way you all can continue on.
So we want to continue on with the...
Yeah, I know we interrupted just after the introduction of like what is, from the perspective of this topic or the perspective of the demo that you all did, what does DevOps mean?
Right. So I think we gave them, what is DevOps in terms of how Red Hat envision DevOps with the product. And we have some slides that explain the workflow of the demo we built to explain that. Maybe we can show and we can go for it.
Okay. So in this slide, it's really showing the two personas or use cases that typically happen when you're building and deploying applications. On the inner loop side is really where the developer resides. So they're responsible for actually writing the code and building it out. So in the inner loop, I can wave my cursor, but I'm not sure it shows up. Oh, it does show up on the screen. Great. They write their code, then they actually build it using, MVN build or npm build or whatever framework language you're using. They create a local artifact on their system, then they can go ahead and then debug that as needed. And then finally, when they're happy with the work that they've done, they can push that into a Git repository. That could be a direct commit, or more often than not, it's a pull or merge request into a Git repository. So this is all the developer on the inner loop side and the things that they're responsible for. Once they make that push into a Git repository, automation takes over, and then we get into the outer loop. So in the outer loop is when we actually want to take that code, integrate it with all the other developers that are on that team working on that application, and deploy it out into a variety of different environments. So in this case, once the change in Git happens, then there can be a code review if it's a pull request, or if it's just a direct commit to Git, it can skip right to the build. So after the code review, we can do the build. The pipeline will take a code, clone the repo, build it out, and then it can run a variety of tests on that. And essentially, this is about shifting things left, right? Instead of doing it at the end of the process or just before you deploy an application, making sure that it's built into the pipeline in an automated fashion. So we can look at that code from a compliance point of view using tools like SonarQube or SNCC, for example. We can also look at it when we build it into an image and look at it from an image compliance point of view as well, with tools like the Claire scanner in Quay, as well as the runtime scanners that are available in ACS. Once you've done all of that and you're satisfied with the application, we can run it through the integration tests. So these are different than the unit tests that the developer is typically running here, where it's running on their workstation or in their IDE, and it's helping them validate the changes they're making are still compliant with their unit tests. The integration tests are typically when you're running the application in its environment, and you want to see that, when I'm connecting to that big Oracle database off in the corner, that it still works, and all the tests and everything run at that point in time. And then we can start deploying it into our different environments, be it dev, test, stage. And this cycle, both cycles, will repeat as the developers progress on that work and deploy their code. Now, this outer loop is really handled by the platform. As I mentioned, this is all automated. So in Red Hat's case, this is Tecton and OpenShift pipelines. Even though that is the technology that's included in OpenShift, and I highly recommend using it because it's included and it's supported. You get it essentially for free with OpenShift. You are free to use whatever CI tools that you like with OpenShift. That's the nice thing with OpenShift, is you got a lot of choice in that respect. For the particular...
Sorry to interrupt you, Gerald. I think Docker used to use the phrase batteries included but replaceable.
That's a good phrase. Yeah, I'm going to have to remember that one. It's very, very appropriate. So in terms of the particular demo that we're going to be doing today, so we have an application called the Cool Store application. This is essentially where we can sell a bunch of Red Hat swag out of this store, t-shirts, merchandise, etc., with Red Hat branding on it. And in this demo, what's going to happen is the developer is going to change that code. They're going to use their IDE that's running in OpenShift, which is dev spaces, and Natalia will go through that in some detail. But essentially, this is great from the point of view that, I'm a developer, and I used to be a consultant, and I don't know if others had this experience, but when I would show up at a new client, it would literally take me a week or 2 weeks to set up an environment, right? And they have their 30 pages of instructions I'd have to go through to set up my laptop. Running dev spaces in OpenShift, you don't have to do any of that. You can have a standardized dev environment ready to go, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So once the developer, in this case, Natalia, makes the change and commits that code, it goes into a Git repo, and then the automated build starts happening with OpenShift pipelines, going through all of those steps that we saw in the outer loop previously. So it will run an automated test and integration test on that code using Newman to do some API testing. It will do automated scans of that with ACS, Advanced Cluster Security. And then it will push the image. Actually, that happens before that automated scan. But after it will push that into the repository, the image repository, which in this case is Quay.io, which is our software as a service version of Quay. And once that image is available there, it can start deploying it across the different environments. So it'll deploy it to the dev environment. And then once it gets deployed into dev, it will then generate a PR in order to have an acceptance phase. So one thing that happens here is the gating requirements. So typically when you deploy into production, you have gating requirements that you need to meet. So that PR will include those gating requirements so that the person can just, check off the boxes to ensure that this application is compliant before it actually goes into production. In the dev environment, there are no gating requirements, so it does a straight deploy into that environment without a PR, and Natalia will show you that as we go through the demo. So once that PR is generated, it then needs to be accepted by a human. Once the human accepts it, that will automatically deploy the application to production. And there are other things that we were doing as part of the deployment. I'm not sure that we're showing that today, Natalia, but we were building a mobile version of the application, and we're also provisioning it to the edge with Ansible as well, managing that for us. Because again, Ansible is great in terms of providing that glue to manage all kinds of things. So from a broad overview of the demo today, that's what we're going to be doing.
Yeah. So Andrew, Jonny, I think we need another episode to show the whole demo, because the whole demo itself is 1 hour. So we were thinking to focus just on the automation part and pipeline and GitOps. And if you want, we can do the second time showing also the mobile part and the Ansible part.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, whatever you guys feel like doing.
Yeah, 30 minutes it's not going to happen. For this demo flow is really, it's full of stuff as Gerald was mentioning. But yeah, we can start showing the demo flow if you want. We can start from the beginning. I'm going to start also sharing my screen, so
Yeah.
you can see.
I think the demo will help answer some questions, because otherwise it's just theoretical, right?
Yes, exactly. I saw some people mentioning ACM. The demo, there's ACM, there's ACS, there OpenShift pipeline, OpenShift GitOps, then there's the QA.io, dev spaces, there are OpenShift Web Console as a developer onboarding experience. So I hope the demo helped replying to some of the question. And yeah, let me start sharing my screen. Right on. So I like to start. Sorry for the cascade. I like to start this story from here, from the hybrid cloud console. For this demo, we start from console.redhat.com, and we created 2 clusters. One on AWS, Red Hat OpenShift service on AWS. This is our cluster for dev stage, and this cluster also has the controller for ACM. As ACS, it's a kind of a builder cluster, if you will. And then we have another cluster just for production. So this cluster, it's on Azure. It's Azure Red Hat OpenShift, and it runs just the production application. The application, again, was mentioned by Gerald, is the CoolStore app. So it's an application, simplified version of Red Hat CoolStore. And the purpose of the demo was showing that how we convert a business request, like changing a feature on the e-commerce to the platform. How do we do DevOps with that? So I want to show that those 2 clusters run on AWS. This is the Rosa one. This is this is on Azure. This is the other one, and we use ACM either to create but also put in governance all those 2 clusters. So this is advanced cluster manager for Kubernetes. The way we did it on the demo, the way we position it is the product to create cluster, but also provision cluster and put cluster in governance. You can run the compliancy operator. And so all the node, you can check that compliance to some, PSAI, DSS, or NIST, or any other standard that you need to accomplish too. And you have a list of all the application, all the clusters. So this was one part of the demo, because this demo was also showing how to do DevOps in a multi-cluster, multi-cloud environment. Today, more and more, we have multiple cluster or multiple cloud. That's why Red Hat envisioned an open hybrid cloud, letting all those clouds talk with open standard, openly connected. And I want to show also this was the ACM part. And we also installed ACS, which is Advanced Cluster Security for Kubernetes, because in the demo flow, all our microservices are running pipelines, and the pipeline will perform some security scan on the container image, but also can perform some vulnerability management. So you can decide some CVS score together with the policy you define on ACM. You can design also the score for vulnerability for your application. And so the combination of ACM, of ACS, we thought was a very good to build this DevOps enhanced platform that will scale then at the edge with Ansible, for instance. But the whole story start as a developer story, right? I want to show you, I think is here. I want to show first the production app. This is the cool store application. The production is on the Arrow cluster. As you can see, it's really simple list of items, but this app is a composition of 4 different microservices. And for instance, the purpose in the demo was, okay, we're running out of stocks of Fedora. I know it's a very demanded swag at conference and any places, right? How do we fulfill those Fedoras? The business request was fulfilling the Fedoras. Then we convert it into how we do it into the DevOps platform. We showed ACM, ACS. I'm going to go now into the developer flow. I'm trying to not spending too much time in talking so we can show everything. We start from a source code, and that the source code contains either the source code of the applications. So as we discussed, microservices for each component. We have 4. And then the source code for the Ansible part, but also, and moreover, the source code for the manifest describing this app. The whole demo is installed using GitOps. So Argo CD is provisioning the cluster and also installing the demo in multiple environments. So we have, as we discussed, we have dev, we have stage, we have prod. Dev and stage is in one cluster, and the prod is also in another cluster. So that was an example on how to do that, provisioning with GitOps and deploying with GitOps. The whole story start with, I have my developers working on this project. Those are the developer, me, Gerald, and other developers. So those people can access and start the flow. And we show in the demo how, as a developer here, this is my GitHub account. I can see only the project that I belong to. So the dev project, the stage project, I cannot see. For instance, in this case, I cannot see the prod project. But here, I have the topology of my application deployed on dev. This is the front end. Those are the 3 parts of the backend. Let's say I need to modify just one thing, one piece. How do I get started? The onboarding on OpenShift is really straightforward. From the web console, you enter with your user mapped to the cluster, and also you can take benefit of the quick start. And for the demo, we created a custom quick start. Quick start is kind of a embedded tutorial that walks you through the step that you have to do as a developer. You onboard in the project, you onboard in the cluster, so you can follow along, go into the developer perspective, go into the cool store dev namespace, and then from the topology view, look for the service you want to edit. In this case, I'm gonna change the quantity of the Fedoras, and so I'm gonna edit the source code directly from OpenShift using dev spaces. I know some of you did some question about dev spaces. Dev spaces is a system that lets you code directly, and the cool thing in using OpenShift, and the cool thing is that you can program the developer the workspaces. So here we prepared some workspaces, which is, okay, this developer need Java, need some environment variable, some limit, some request, some run configuration. If you are a developer, you know that in your IDE, you have your run configuration to start everything. So the flow was really, okay, let's show this, how to make this change live, and how to prepare some run configuration. I'm going to show you one of these, which is this one, this development mode for Quarkus. We're using, in this case, this is a Java microservice. We're using Quarkus framework, a framework for Kubernetes native Java modern application development. And this dev mode is really cool because you can test your stuff, and OpenShift is gonna create an OpenShift route that will map your service. So you can, for instance, you can give this URL to a colleague and say, hey, this is my service. Do you think this is working or not? This is very convenient. This works on OpenShift. You don't have to set up anything locally. It's in your tenant. It's kind of a sandbox where you can work. And what you can do using that, you can perform your changes. So for the demo, what we did is we had a really simple API here that use an in-memory database in this case. Of course, you can attach any database that you want. So what we really did is just changing this quantity from 0 to 10, let's say. So if we want to change the Fedora quantity from 0 to 10, now we do the change here. With the hot reload feature, we don't have to restart the Java process. It's going to be automatically done by Quarkus. And look at this feature. This is really cool. Before you start the outer loop, what you can do is running the continuous testing mode. So you run the unit test here, and if it's any error, you fix the error in the inner loop. This is really important. So it looks like I haven't updated the test representing
and
you want to do? Yeah.
I know you're on a roll, Natale. I just want to point out that this whole concept of inner loop and outer loop is something that I recently learned, because I've been trying to learn more about developers and how they work and the things that are important to them and all that other stuff. And it's really interesting to see how a platform like OpenShift, as administrators, we're often completely abstracted from these things. I was a virtualization admin for a long time, right? Jonny, you too, right?
Mm-hmm.
We never knew what was going on inside the VMs, right? Oh, that's a Linux VM. Oh, that's a Windows VM. Yeah, it's managed by so-and-so, or the application belongs to this team. But this whole concept of like what you're showing us right now, where inner loop activities are focused on the writing of code, right? I'm writing code, I'm making application changes, and I'm able to test that locally and non-disruptively, right? I'm not testing in prod. Oftentimes, I'm not even testing in like pre-prod, right? It's something that's running specific to me and my development activities. And when I'm happy, right, when I've made my code changes and implemented the feature or fixed the bug or whatever, is when I commit it and it moves to an outer loop activity, which is where things like pipelines come into play. And the pipeline is the one that's going through and actually building the full application and running the full test suite and doing all of those types of things. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong there, or clarify as the case may be.
No, that's perfectly correct. And this is the added value, as you mentioned, right? You can have this. You can also program this part. You can provide something that is programmable, that something that you can define beforehand, and then you remove the friction to the developers to set up the environment. You also ensure security, because you are using the right container image, right, for your environment. You're configuring automatically. As you can see, I already pushed my changes because I verified that the changes are good, the unit tests are good. You can either perform a security scan with the Visual Studio Code extension, in this case over here. But the cool thing is that you have kind of a sandbox, a secure sandbox, that you can start your inner loop, and then the automation kick off the outer loop, if that makes sense also to you. To your point then, Andrea, I just wanted to show that, yeah, this is the inner loop. I did my change. So from my side, it's fine. So what is happening here? I'm going back to the flow, and please interrupt me for any for any question or any observation. The Git push is starting this pipeline. This pipeline is a OpenShift pipeline, it's a Tecton pipeline, pre-configure using also GitOps. So we're managing with Argo CD the definition of the pipeline for each environment. This user can eventually access or not the CI/CD namespace. It's up to you. But as you can see, if you configure, we configure, for instance, Nexus, SonarQube, so we can perform here where we do the unit test, here the static code analysis, here the container image build, and then the deploy on stage, the integration test running into one of those environments. and then you invoke ACS to perform a vulnerability assessment, a vulnerability scan on the container image. It's up to you. You can use the Tecton task calling the rockctl to perform that action. So this is gonna take some seconds. But
the one interesting thing here from my perspective, because I often get asked about this when I do this demo for customers, Natalia, and I don't know if it comes up for you, is why are you running ACS in parallel instead of, say, blocking the dev environment, right? Run ACS before you deploy to dev, and if it fails the scan, don't deploy to dev. And you can certainly do that, but the reason why we're doing it this way is that, in my experience, I don't want to block developers from doing their work, right? And they need to be able to deploy things into at least one environment so all their changes get aggregated together and they can test it out. What I don't want to happen is ACS says, okay, this image isn't good anymore, and now I got to get the security team involved, and that takes 2 weeks to figure out, what we're doing or whether there's a fix for it or not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just want the developers to keep going. So in this case, we're saying we don't have any gating requirements for dev and stage from a security perspective. We can just deploy directly into those environments. Prod does require a gating requirement, which is why you don't see prod on this flow, and that will be coming with a pull request in the next step.
Exactly. So the idea is that you do automated promotion across dev stage environment, just to show how to do automated promotion across environment. And then for prod, there's a manual process. In this demo, we implemented it after a notification on Slack that everything has been deployed in dev and stage, and the Slack notification is here. As you can see, there's a Slack message and say, oh, there's an image scan failed because this container image contains some vulnerability. But here's the result of the pipeline of the Quay image scan, the ACS scan, the Sonar Cube. So you can review all of this, and then you can decide if you want to go ahead or not. So that's one of the questions before. How do we do the approval in Tecton? Here, the approval is invoking in KPI service now or something, no? But after you reviewed, for instance, this was the dev one. As you recall, it was 0 before. I don't know if you had the time to share with the audience, but now it's 10. This is dev. This is stage, but prod is still 0 because we haven't approved anything in prod, right? And Gerald was mentioning, okay, for prod, you know what? We need to do some manual process or some gated action. And the gated action here is implemented through pipelines again. And I want to show you how we did it. So we basically created another pipeline, which is called promote to prod. When the WebSocket will come back to live, I'm going to show you.
And while we're waiting for that, I just wanted to point out that pipelines aren't limited to just like running a build process. You can use them. We talked about this. Who was it? Ian, I think, Jonny. When Ian was on the stream of, if your application uses maybe something that's running in a virtual machine, and OpenShift virtualization, you can clone out that virtual machine, right? Or use Cloud Init in that virtual machine to deploy that application component to build a whole new test environment. I've talked with some of our storage partners, including ODF, where you can do things like clone entire data sets. So that way you're using real production data as it goes through and it does whatever it's doing in the pipeline, but you're not actually affecting production data. It's not just, go in and run this build, pull this code and do the thing. It can be any number of things. And I think, and I suspect that you all will talk about this in a moment, right? Integrating Ansible automation platform expands that out to basically the entire world of possibilities. I talked with a customer, it's been a little while, but they were using Ansible in a pipeline when they were deploying things into production to go out and reconfigure like external network devices and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That's another great use case for Ansible. In this demo, we show that we deploy the cool store e-commerce at the edge. It was like deploying via Ansible on some small devices, or in this case was a simulation, but just use Ansible to deploy the app at the edge. Let's say the store is also the website is at the store for some Wi-Fi tethering something, right? You can deploy at the stores with Ansible. So Ansible is really making a comprehensive offer for DevOps, extend the capability outside Kubernetes, if you will. And so it's a comprehensive offering on the DevOps platform in this case.
Yeah, I see your thing popped back in now. So
yeah, so just wanted to show that the pipeline did this. Quay.io is performing some scan for vulnerability scan, something happening here in Quay.io, but because it's requeued. But I have a 100 tag and I have a one prod tag. So the idea is that we tag the container image to prod, and then the prod environment is going to use that. So in this case, you can decide or not if you want to go with 10 IG vulnerability for the demo purpose. I think it's fine. In general, it is not, right? But here, the promoter prod pipeline is really a simple pipeline. Version, resulting tag, and it's using just Copio to tag the image. Cool thing, Gerald did this configuration. When this is tagged, so it pushed to Quay is gonna call back the pipeline, is gonna call back a webhook, and this webhook is gonna start the pipeline that create actually the pull request for changing this stuff on production. So the create pull request pipeline is invoked by Quay, and this is again getting the digest, updating the branch, and creating a pull request for production that somebody has to review, and approve.
Yeah, the neat thing with Tecton is that it can take webhooks from a variety of systems that it wasn't even designed to handle. You can define a trigger binding, and using that as long with cell interceptors, do a lot of neat things in terms of accepting requests from disparate systems that are out there to trigger pipelines.
Yeah, so this can be also automated. For now, in the demo, it's just from the log, but you can send it to Slack, open a ticket on ServiceNow or Jira, whatever. And here you have the final review. Okay, this is the Quay scan, this is the ACS scan, this is the SonarQube result. Those links are existing in the cluster. Those are auto-configured by the GitOps automation with Argo CD doing that. And then finally, you can merge this. And now let me go finally to Argo CD. Argo CD as, the CI/CD project, the dev project, the stage. And now Argo CD is updating also prod for the environment where you configure Argo CD. It's one cluster, it's a two cluster, one Argo per cluster. I think for the demo, we use the strategy one Argo per cluster. When Argo CD finished this job, also the production is updated, and Gerald here also configure a post-sync hook as a job to send a notification or just make an example that this is working. So if everything is working, also the prod app now contains 10 items, as you can see.
The post-sync hook here is actually used to run an integration test after you deployed to prod, just to give it a kind of a thumbs up that, okay, prod didn't go south for some reason. That's essentially what it's doing there.
Yeah.
So if I can recap, so as a developer, I use dev spaces, I write code, I validate my inner loop. Basically, I'm writing good code. I get to my, the point where I want to commit it. I commit my code, which triggers a pipeline to kick off to build the code, right? Or build the application. I use integrations like ACS in order to do security, right? The whole shift left thing that we all love to say these days. As well as the software security pipeline and all of that other stuff that Red Hat's been talking about lately. We talked about that at Summit. All of that gets brought in. The end result of that is a fully functioning test environment where I can go in and kind of run my end-to-end validations. When that is good, effectively we use a commit to the GitOps repository, right?
Right.
So, and when we update the GitOps repository is where Argo comes in and now deploys that into the production instance. So we're using pipelines and OpenShift to manage test. We're using GitOps in order to authoritatively manage what's happening in production.
Exactly. That is the workflow. And I just, since we are going to the end, I just want to point out that The kickstart of everything now for that is using the start of everything can be Developer Hub, which is Red Hat Backstage distribution. So you can start the journey from here. You don't need to you use GitOps to configure everything, but here you have the link to DevSpacer or Podman Desktop or Argo CD, and you can use the golden path template to scaffold a new app as well, or the existing application. So this can be for the next step of our DevOps story. This is the full start of everything, and then we expand as we discussed with the pipeline, GitOps, Ansible, and so on for multiple use cases.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool to see all of these things come to fruition. Especially I like seeing the backstage stuff because 6 months ago, 8 months ago was when we first started. I guess participating in that community in earnest. And so seeing it now called Red Hat Developer Hub, where we've added in and integrated and done a whole bunch of other stuff there, that's really cool to me.
And to your point, Andrew, the cool thing is that we're supporting plugin, and I think we're bringing enterprise expertise to the open source project, to the upstream. We're bringing Tecton support, Argo CD support, single sign-on, Kicklock, right? Is our opinionated Red Hat ecosystem, but still open source software that we bring in a kind of a more. We are bringing more use cases, right? And we're supporting those. And so you can scaffold your project from scratch, GitHub and Argo CD and pipeline and everything. So basically you can redo this demo at ease, right? The next time if you want to do your own.
Yeah. Gerald, I wanted to ask you a question about, this is just one way, I'll call it an opinionated way that we showed how to do a DevOps workflow inside of OpenShift. But of course, there's always like 900 different ways that you can do anything and everything. So as we highlighted at the beginning, get a GitOps guru, right, and all that other stuff. I'm curious, like from your perspective, is there pros, cons to using pipelines versus GitOps for different things? Like, would it be in some scenarios, would it be more appropriate to use GitOps more heavily or less so?
Yeah, from my perspective, really, it's called CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery, or deployment, depending on your perspective or what you're doing. Tecton Pipelines is really good at the CI stuff. It can do the CD stuff, and traditionally in the past, we've done it with Jenkins and pipelines and GitHub Actions and other tools in the past. But Argo really excels, and OpenShift GitOps really excels at the CD part. And really the big difference between it versus a CI tool is that, as Jonny knows, it's constantly reconciling. Right. So unlike a pipeline which runs once, deploys once, and it's done, Argo is constantly monitoring your infrastructure and monitoring the Git repo, ensuring that the infrastructure is in compliance with the state that's being declared in Git. And that's the big benefit from my perspective of GitOps over using a CI tool to handle the deployment. So typically for me, the CI is still pipelines. It's still doing the build of images. Don't use GitOps for that, or the build of the source code. But for deployment, definitely use GitOps for that aspect of things, particularly in Kubernetes, where you're leveraging all the declarative goodness, and take advantage of that reconciliation process that's bringing to the table.
Yeah, Jamie there, Open GitOps project, making a shameless plug for y'all. So, and I actually did not know that project existed. Is there anything you want to say about that, Gerald?
Oh, it's a great project that is really working hard to define a lot of the standardization and methodologies around GitOps, like what is GitOps, what are the principles of GitOps, that sort of thing. So that project is doing great work in terms, and thanks. Johnny's posted a link. Thanks, Jonny. Yeah, that project is doing great work in that, and I highly recommend checking that out. And if you have an interest in GitOps, please do join us and volunteer. We're always looking for new people to work on different things.
Awesome. Yeah, I know it. GitOps is one of those things that it gets brought up a lot for a lot of different use cases. We've talked about it here on the stream before as GitOps for administrators, and using, Argo CD to manage the configuration of clusters and comparing that with how, for example, ACM does cluster management, cluster configuration, and kind of where each one of those fits in. So it's
Yeah.
really, again, there's so many different ways to do basically everything inside of Kubernetes, and OpenShift is certainly no exception to that rule. So it's great to see all of this stuff happening and seeing the I won't call them best practices, but like some common patterns, if you will, emerging and congealing.
For sure. And it's interesting too, because like as Johnny knows, I think I'm very biased in certain ways in terms of what I like and don't like. And it's always fun talking to people that have different biases or different preferences and kind of hashing out why one thing makes sense versus another, right? And I think in GitOps in particular, there's no one way for everybody. It's very much going to be dependent on your organization and how you're structured in terms of how you deploy OpenShift GitOps, how you manage your repositories, etc.
Yep. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, because now, with what do we call it? Zero touch provisioning. You're essentially using GitOps to deploy entire clusters. You can use similar sort of thing if you're using hosted control planes, because a cluster is nothing more than an instance of a custom resource. So you can now manage, effectively end-to-end life cycle of entire clusters with both pipelines as well as with Argo CD and GitOps. So
super cool.
Yeah. The hosted control planes is really cool to me, with the concept of, I need to test my application, for our partners, for software, folks who are deploying against multiple versions of Kubernetes or OpenShift. I can spin up entire OpenShift clusters with one custom resource instance. It takes just a couple of minutes to get everything up and running, and then I can deploy my application and I can run my entire validation, test suite against whatever that version happens to be, and then move on. And it takes no effort at all. I was talking with one of our storage partners working on their CSI integration, and it's, we got to test against every supported version of OpenShift, and historically that particular partner, they use Ansible. And using Ansible in order to go out and deploy those clusters with each one of their releases. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of resources. A full run is like several hours. And so hosted control planes has the potential to reduce that significantly, which is awesome. All right. I know we are running just a few minutes over now. So for our audience, if you have any questions, anything that you want to ask Natalia or Gerald while we're still on the stream, please go ahead and do that. If you're not watching us live, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach me at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com or Jonny, Jonny, at redhat.com. And we'll make sure to follow up with Gerald, Natalia, whoever we need to inside of Red Hat in order to find those answers. Dwayne, how do I join new efforts? I'm assuming if you're referring to things like the Open GitOps project and stuff like that, most of the time there will be, like if it's a GitHub repository, there's a contributors.md. That's a good way to look and see where you can begin to get involved. If it has a landing page like opengitops.dev, a lot of times they'll be either at the top of the page or at the very bottom of the page, like a how do I contribute or how do I get involved link, which are always great ways. Gerald, I don't know if you have any specific suggestions for OpenGitOps though.
There is also a working group on the CNCF Slack that folks can join as well, WG-GitOps, if they're interested in kind of having some guidance in terms of where to get started. But I posted the link in YouTube as well for the OpenShift GitOps website because Jamie had it in Twitch. So,
got it. Yeah. Sometimes links get reposted, sometimes they don't. YouTube's weird about links and what they will allow us to post through the API, or I say us, what our streaming utility here uses.
Yeah, it can lag a little bit too, I think, as well.
Yeah. Gabriel, love combining GitOps with ACM policies for managing multiple fleet clusters. Yeah, I have seen, I will say that is probably the most frequent way I've seen us do it. That could be just because the people that I'm involved in, like Gerald, or involved with, that's the way you all prefer to do it. But yeah.
The one nice thing with ACM that I really like about its policies is the ability to do lookups on the cluster, which GitOps cannot do.
Yes.
So I typically use the policy to populate a bunch of environment variables in the repo, like the cluster ID, the subdomain, and then I can use a plugin to just essentially swap those out in my YAML when I need to if I'm jumping between different systems. As you guys know, we have an internal system called the Red Hat Demo Product System, and it constantly gives you a new subdomain, and trying to standardize a GitOps repo for that is difficult, and ACM lets me do that quite easily.
Yeah, we use the lookup feature quite a bit. Like it's the major drawback to like Argo and really Helm because of having to have the live cluster and stuff like that. So having that lookup capability within ACM is pretty awesome.
All right. Well, so as Jonny said at the start, and now I've lost the tab that had it. I don't know what happened to our notes. Here they are. So the next few weeks are going to be very, very full across various partners, as well as different things that are happening inside of OpenShift itself. And I know we've still got a bunch of stuff just to cover with core OpenShift 4.13 features and capabilities that we just haven't gotten to yet because we've had so much other stuff going on. So.
Yeah.
As always recommend that if you have, I'll say, space in your inbox to subscribe to one of the channels, go ahead and do that. Just keep in mind, it's not just our stream that you'll get any alerts or messages for. It's kind of anything that they end up posting corporately to the channels. If not, you can always follow us on social media or on all of the various places. Jonny and I usually do our absolute best to post links or reminders and other stuff when we're doing a stream and what the topic is. And last but not least, there is also, it's red.ht/livestream. And that will take you to the live streaming landing page. And on there is a link to the Google Calendar. Thank you, Jonny. Is a link to the Google Calendar that you can subscribe to that has all of the live streams and stuff like that. I know I always forget to tune into the GitOps Guide to the Galaxy. So I subscribed to the live streaming calendar and then copied the event over to my own calendar. So that way I could get a reminder specifically for that one. So that's a good way to keep up with what we're doing too. With that being said, Natalia, Gerald, really, really appreciate y'all coming on today. This has been phenomenal. And this is just scratching across the surface. If you go look at the YouTube playlist that's linked, that playlist has, I think it's 7 or 8 or 9 videos, something like that. That cross just all kinds of different things that were covered in the full demo that happened, including going in depth with a number of these things. Excuse me while I cough. So yeah, definitely, if you have time, I always like to, when I'm at the gym, I always like to put in headphones and then I'll just let the video play while I'm listening and doing other things. Because I kind of treat the live streams like a podcast in many ways. Which is good. Vijay, can you please explain a little bit of integration GitOps with OpenShift and Tekton? I'm not quite sure what that means. Gerald, does that?
Yeah, no, it rings a bell. So as we talked about, there's 2 ways, right? Kind of the direct integration, which we did in Dev and Stage, and then the other integration, which is the PR. So for Dev and Stage, there's a task we use that does a sync and wait. It essentially calls the Argo APIs to initiate a synchronize and then wait for Argo to finish that synchronization before it moves to the next step of Tekton. So that's essentially how we did that there. And then the PR is straightforward. And once the PR is merged, Argo just picks it up automatically.
Got it.
Yeah, the cool thing is the real thing is the integration test, right? You're moving to the next environment only if the integration tests are good. So against the real environment. And that's why we could automate everything.
Yeah, and that's why we had to wait and why it can't just be done asynchronously, because you don't want to do tests if dev failed.
Right.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Fayaz, seeing some performance issues in 4.10, pod not getting deleted when deleting deployments. So oftentimes when I encounter those things, it turns out to be a resource contention issue. So it could be, and it could happen in, again, most commonly in my experience, in one of 2 places. So one, literally the pods that are running the console or something like that are starved for resources. The other one being the API servers. So the API servers is a generic term or a generic reference in this case to anything that might be affecting the API servers. So it could be literally the API server pods don't have CPU. It could be etcd doesn't have, it's experiencing storage latency or network latency, right? There's a whole bunch of things that can affect the API responsiveness. What I would suggest is if support, and I'm assuming you've opened a support case. If not, definitely start with a support case.
It looks like he has, yeah.
Yeah, so short term, you can look at the performance, the metrics graphs for the API server, and look for anything that looks out of the ordinary, right? See if there's spikes in there where it goes up to, hundreds of milliseconds or even seconds worth of latency when doing API requests. Same thing for etcd, right? Check the fsync, the wall, and how long those things take. Get an idea of whether or not storage is affecting. If there's a etcd leader election, that'll cause things. It'll cause a whole bunch of ripples, right? Where maybe a node got rebooted or something like that and has to do a leader election. It basically pauses all etcd operations until the new leader is elected. And if that takes a little bit, then that means that, well, API server is effectively paused, and there can be, you can feel that for a little bit as things catch up, particularly in a very busy cluster. So that would be just off the top of my head with, the little bit of information there. That would be where I'd maybe check. All right.
So much wisdom, Andrew. So much wisdom.
I'm really good at breaking things, and I've learned through all the various ways of breaking things how that goes. My colleague Eric, his Slack icon is Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah,
and it's because he's good at breaking things, right? Yeah, I sympathize with that. I understand. Oh no, what does this mean? Oh, I thought that was going to fix it. Oh, that made it worse. Oh no, now I actually have to go and dig around.
Whoops.
Yeah. So thank you both very much. Really appreciate you joining. For our audience, please don't hesitate to reach out at any point in time if you have any questions. We'd love to follow up with you, whether it's about today's topic, whether about anything else that comes to mind for you. With that being said, it's good to be back. It's good to see you, Jonny. Looking forward to the next few weeks and all the stuff that we got going on. So I will leave you with our last words.
Awesome. Yeah, Natalie, Gerald, thanks again for coming on. I would love to have you back on for part 2. If y'all want to come back on, that'd be awesome to do the full demo. I did want to call out a couple of Slack channels. I think you mentioned it, but I'm not sure, Andrew. But it's the OpenShift users Slack, and if you want to get a hold of people like me and Andrew, use this link to go there. And then there's also the OpenShift Commons Slack, and if also other people like us and people out in the community. So if you have OKD issues or stuff like that, use the OpenShift Commons Slack, and hopefully you can get some answers. But yeah, other than that, thanks everybody. Andrew, I'm really glad you're back, man. Like this, it's a lot for my ADD stuff to try and handle. So I'm glad you're here, man. Welcome back.
Thank you. Welcome back. Bye-bye.
Thank you.